It has a functional hood scoop, a turbo boxer engine, and a 6-speed manual transmission, making this one of the best all-wheel drive sedans that you can buy. Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the 2024 Subaru WRX, and it's painted in Subaru's best color, in my opinion, World Rally Blue. And although this is one of the most famous and iconic rally cars, it's not perfect. So today I get to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of the all-new WRX to help you decide if this is worth your time and money, so you can expect to see a walk around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts. And huge thanks to Twin Falls Subaru for letting me borrow this one for the day. I'll link it below if you're interested. Otherwise, let's dive right in with this review. If you guys like the WRX, World Rally Blue, or functional hood scoops, don't forget to like this video. Thanks, guys. But if you're new to the WRX, you really need to know that these first came out back in a year called 1992 as a trim level of the Impreza model. They were only sold though in Australia, New Zealand, and some European countries. So basically everywhere except for the United States, which is unfortunate. But that all changed in a year called 2002 when the first WRX, nicknamed the Bug Eye, showed up on American shores. That's because they're assembled in Japan, where they still are assembled today. And it wasn't until 2015 when the WRX, formerly a trim level, became its own model. It basically grew up and graduated. This is now the second generation of the WRX. The first generation of its own model came out from 2015 to 2021, and it was nicknamed the VA. The newest ones, like this, are now nicknamed the VB, and this is the third year of the VB because they started in 2022. And while these have a reputation for being one of the most desirable cars for car enthusiasts in their teenage years and their 20s, I am starting to see more people in their 30s and 40s driving these around, probably because now those people are at the age that they can afford one of these. While the WRX used to be a $20-something thousand car, now the cheapest one, like this base model, actually starts about $33,000 before destination and extra goodies. So the way this one is spec'd, it's almost $35,000 before you convince Twin Falls Subaru to give you some sort of discount. So they're not cheap, other than the fact that it's still over $10,000 cheaper than the average new car. But thankfully, for those who grew up desiring one of these, it's still being made. You can still try to purchase one. The only downside is there's no longer a Subaru WRX STI, which is the slightly high performance model, as well as the hatchback that died when this left the Impreza family. But we do have to talk about the styling characteristics of this VB generation for, if only a minute. First of all, the shark fin antenna. It looks really sharp, and I do think that actually looks pretty cool. But it's interesting that this Subaru, like all the others, got part of the package bulk deal that Subaru did when they bought all the black plastic cladding. There's cladding on every single corner. It's even on the side skirt, basically, which kind of has a textured theme. You have some ventilation on the front of it. You have quite a bit down here, and unfortunately the base model doesn't have fog lights, but it does have a functional hood scoop, really bright LEDs. The side mirror caps are even painted, and you can see the lines going down the side of it horizontally, which look really good. But look at this. I think Subaru bought the rights to the last generation Honda Civic taillights. Although it is a good design, that's totally from the last generation Honda Civic. And then this doesn't look as predominant on camera as it does in person, but the bumper, the bottom cladding portion does stick out a couple inches past, you know, the painted area, which I find interesting. And as far as what's public knowledge, Subaru sells about 20 to 40,000 of these WRXs every single year. So for a performance car or the sport compact class, that's not bad. But if you look at another similarly sized vehicle like the Honda Civic or the Toyota Corolla, those vehicles sell sometimes upwards of 10-fold what the WRX sells. So you really don't see these very often, which is why it's always a treat to see one in the wild, or if you get the opportunity to drive one, I definitely recommend you do. But for 2024, there's really not any major changes other than a 5th trim level of the WRX was added. That's the TR. It's basically what the Subaru WRX STI would be, with some extra performance fancy bits, minus a bump in performance, although I do hope that the STI comes back someday and with an unequal length header. And while I find it quite disrespectful that Mustang over there decided to photobomb my filming, it is worth noting that the WRX is about 15.3 feet long. The wheelbase is 8.75 feet, so it's pretty planted. These are roughly 6 feet wide, just under 5 feet tall. And then depending on how it's spec'd with the transmission and the options, it weighs roughly 3,300 pounds, which is quite good for a small sedan. but the payload capacity is about 850 pounds. So if you max it out with 200-pound occupants, you won't have any cargo capacity left to carry stuff in the trunk, so keep that in mind. It has roughly 5.4 inches of ground clearance, a fairly aggressive for putting the power down, final drive ratio of 444, and then these can do a full circle in 36 feet, which is slightly better than a crossover, say like a Subaru Forester, but it actually feels pretty sharp and agile driving it. I just have a few final things to mention on the exterior before we quickly go through the inside and take it for a drive. But these, especially those with eyesight now, are actually a top safety pick. So Subaru, in their typical fashion, tries to develop very safe vehicles, which I appreciate. But when the gas door is locked, the bums aren't going to be siphoning any of your 16.6 gallons of gas. When you unlock it, though, it opens up. But because this engine is tuned differently than the other turbo Subaru Boxers, you actually need premium octane in this one. And the EPA agents think if you drive conservatively, you can get 19 city, 26 highway, so your max road trip and range is well into the 300s. And then this has a performance all-season Dunlop tire. It's actually a 235/45/17, and I think it looks pretty good. Driving it over here, I didn't notice it kicking up too many rocks, which I've noticed on other Subarus in the past. But on the base model, this is your key. The basic old school non-proximity key with unlock, lock, release of the trunk, and panic button. But you'll also notice because it's not the proximity key, you don't have proximity key features to unlock and lock it. The driver's side door panel actually still looks pretty decent for being a base model. It's all black, dark materials, and there's a variety of different touches. But overall, they're all soft touch. The door card's just fine, kind of an interesting theme design right there. Bottle holder, snacks, unnamed speaker. There's nothing on the door sill. WRX in red on the all-weather mats. Rubberized pedals, hood release, OBD 2 port is under there as well. Fuse box. These are the basic options on this WRX. Ventilation, lighting stock. And then actually pretty comfortable cloth seats, which WRX and other Subarus with cloth seats usually actually feel really good. And there's enough bolstering to hold you in for it not being a dedicated performance seat. But sitting inside the WRX is actually pretty nice. It has a flat bottom, leather wrapped wheel, the horn. Typical Subaru horn. Nice and comfortable in here, easy to find a good driver position. You have the basic heads-up display that has the flashing lights, which I think is pretty cool. And when you fire it right up with that physical key, the needles dance. Oh, clutch, this isn't an automatic. There we go. A little bit of a roar to life. Sounds really good. There's no rev limiter on this one. And then you can go through volume and voice controls on the left, adaptive cruise controls on the right, and down here you can go through your display. I do like that this has tire pressure monitoring on it. And then you have the big 11.6-inch screen, which is not my favorite. You have a few options up here to check it out, but I really like the widgets up top. And then you can see oil temp and water temp. Otherwise, it is what it is. That's not why you buy the WRX, but that's the screen that you get even on the base model. The backup camera, you have to go up, over, and down for reverse. Trajectory lines do move. The screen, though, like my problem on all the other 11.6-inch screen Subarus, is it only takes up a little bit of the actual screen. And clarity is not fantastic, but you do have a 12-volt aux, USBs, rubberized area. Nice shifter. It's not as notchy as some other performance cars, but it's better than a lot of other vehicles, if that makes any sense. Manual e-brake. A place to store your gum and your coins. You know, some bottles or snack pockets, and a small center console with the 12-volt down there. Otherwise, up top, this one, remember, it is optioned with the compass, the auto-dimming mirrors, and the garage door openers. Otherwise, you have incandescent lighting up top. You have no lighting right there, and it doesn't slide or anything, which is unfortunate. But with that said, let's turn it off, and I'll hop in the back. And let me just say that the Rally Blue paint seriously looks so much better in person than I know it's picking up on camera today. So if you haven't seen one of these in person, when you do, they really stand out, at least in my opinion. But the rear door panel, basically all the same dark materials, soft touch everywhere, thankfully, functional handle and armrest, small bottle and snack pocket, unnamed speaker. And then this is the seat. This is the bench with the 40 and the 60 split. 40 on this side. Subaru seats are super light, and it's easy to lay them down. But at 5'11", in real time getting in the back, I actually have quite a bit of room in front of my knees. I have maybe 1 inch above my head, if that, but I don't have an armrest right here. and I don't have anything on the base model. So although I'm not even the backseat driver, that would be reserved for the other seat, it still is comfortable. It's actually big enough, big as it needs to be for a 3,300 pound performance sedan. With that said, let me hop out and I'll show you the trunk. Although I still have mixed feelings about all the black plastic cladding, especially on the WRX, because a lot of people who own these are not actually taking it off-road. That would be silly, even though that's what these are ultimately designed for. There's a few ways to get into the back. You can either push the button that's on the dashboard, you can push the button that's underneath the Subaru emblem, you can climb through the back seats, or just use the remote to unlock it. But those shocks are actually strong enough to lift it up, which I find pretty cool. Back here, you have 12.5 cubic feet of room, which is nice. You have the rest of the all-weather mats, and you have, you know, the rubberized mat back here. And then underneath, you have just a fix-a-flat kit and a little bit of storage, but no spare tire on the WRX. Let's drop the hatch, which is light, easy to reach, and seriously looks really good. And we'll move around to the passenger side. And if you get a ride in the front occupant seat, you'll notice that the door panel overall looks basically the exact same. You just don't have all the controls that the driver paid to get. Otherwise, still nothing on the door sill, but the blue paint seriously looks so good. This is not manually adjusted, but my backpack, which isn't quite alive, doesn't really care or tell the difference. You can again see kind of how that bolstering sticks out and holds you while not being overly thick. No storage on the transmission tunnel or above the locking glove box. And it's really not that big. There's no plugins in here, which I wish there was, but it's big enough to hold your gloves and your papers. So with that said, let's come around to the front. I'm gonna pop the hood and then I'll show you what the F824 DIT turbo engine looks like, and we'll talk about it. Under the hood, you'll notice that Subaru has actually done such a good job designing their boxer engine. Even the functional air scoop redirects the cold air to the top mount intercooler, but otherwise you'll notice everything's top mount, easy to get to. The fuse box, the air filter, all of your reservoirs, even the top mount oil filter, the battery, another fuse box. It's all right there, easy to get to, but you'll notice that this 2.4 liter engine is tight. It really doesn't have a lot of extra room around it in the periphery like this engine does when it's in the Ascent or one of the bigger Subaru models, but it makes about 271 horsepower, 11 more than the other turbo models, and a little bit less torque at about 258. The power peaks at about 5,600 RPM. The torque peaks at about, 3,000 RPM. I'll correct that number on the screen, but it's a good engine. It does need 91 premium octane, but it's well designed, well placed, and everything's easy to get to. Alternator, serpentine belt, oil dipstick. It's all right there, easy to identify. And there's a reason why Subarus have such, a mechanic and enthusiast cult following, because they're easy to work on yourself. Let's drop the hood though, take it for a drive. Initial driving impressions of the 24 WRX. It pulls really good when it's under boost, and at about 12 PSI peak boost pressure, does a pretty good job. Handles corners really well. The suspension is pretty stiff for what this is, being a rally sport sedan. It's a little bit stiffer than most vehicles, but it's not as stiff as something like a ZL11LE or some crazy track monster of a car. But when you're paired with the 6-speed manual transmission, the 2.4 liter boxer engine is so much more fun than it is in my turbo Outback. I do want to mention though that this shifter, it's not as notchy, it's not as good feeling, and the throws are pretty far. So having driven my 2023 Miata Club into town today, this does not feel nearly as good. It also doesn't feel nearly as good as something like the BRZ, the GR86, or even like the Ford Focus RS that I drove just recently. But under other driving conditions, it handles really well. It's easy to shift, it's easy to downshift, but because the size of this engine is only 2.4 liters, you don't get a lot of engine braking out of it. But it changes directions really well. There's not any dead feel. The steering ratio, I think, is tuned pretty nicely. There was a bump right there, and you can definitely feel it in this stiffer suspension. But it handles itself well on the road. We'll get up to speed a little bit, and then we'll come to a stop at the stop sign. Show you a little bit of engine braking. Really doesn't slow me down. So half brake pedal right here. The nose does not dive. It feels pretty planted and confidence inspiring. Then when it's time to get back up to speed, even at partial throttle, the engine's kind of loud. I of course wish it had the boxer rumble that the old WRXs had from the unequal length header, but it does a good job. It gets right up to speed, and then when you're in 6th gear like I am right here, just cruising, coasting, You can see -9 PSI of boost pressure, a little bit over 2,000 RPM at 53 miles an hour. And overall, you know, it feels good, it feels planted. I know the backpack's having a good time. These seats are not overly aggressively bolstered like, you know, Recaro's would be, or some dedicated race seat that you could throw in aftermarket, but it's comfortable. It's enough to hold you into place, so when you are having a little bit of fun, taking corners a little bit more quickly than you otherwise would in a lesser rally car vehicle, feels good. I really like it a lot, but I'm sure you guys want to see how fast it is, so let's do the 0 to 60. I'll get to my private road and we'll pick up there. 0 to 60 in the 2024 Subaru WRX Base model. Traction is off, track mode is on. I will do a light launch, but my private road is not a sticky drag strip, and we are almost a mile above sea level. So even though this vehicle is turboed, it's still gonna be down on power, probably at least 7 or 8%. Let's go. True 0 to 60 came in at 6.52 seconds, which, given the fact that we're almost a mile above sea level and my private road isn't a sticky drag strip, I really don't think that's too bad. But let's get to my final thoughts and finish up this video. My final thoughts of the 2024 Subaru WRX, specifically this base model with the 6-speed manual transmission, is honestly, I think it's a really fun car. And I think it's actually been about a year since I've driven a WRX last, which is crazy since in that time I've driven the Civic Type R, the Focus RS, you know, probably a few other, you know, turbo 4-cylinder cars that I'm forgetting, and a lot of other performance cars. But the WRX does a really good job of bundling fun, performance, functionality all together in one rally blue compact sedan platform. And I think if you guys are interested in potentially being one of the 20 to 40,000 people who buy this each year, you definitely need to go to the dealership or find a used one to take out for a drive and see what you think of it. But don't stop there. Test drive the competition. Make sure that you guys are truly buying the right vehicle for you. So whether that's a WRX or that's a Mustang, which I'm totally kidding, have fun. Drive what you want. Drive what you're going to enjoy. But test drive it. Don't just order one before you do. This honestly feels more refined and feels a little bit better than it did last year when I drove the last one. A lot of other performance cars since then, and maybe my perspective has changed a little bit. This one wasn't as rough riding. It didn't kick up rocks like I remember in last year's review. This was just a really fun time, and I see why so many people covet and envy and love the WRX. And with that said, remember, if you like this video, show your support. That small act of kindness will help me and my channel, but it also helps you. It helps YouTube tell that you want to see more stuff like this. Comment your thoughts and opinions below, and of course subscribe. And don't forget, if you want this one specifically, I'll link it in the description below. It's at Twin Falls Subaru, and I wish you the best. I hope to hear from you and see you on the next video, but until then, take care.